One, two, three. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Insight Cafe. I'm your host, Nikon Gormley, and today, I have my dear friend Martin Dara, all the way from the US. And firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Nikon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I've been watching this show, watching you do your thing for a long time. I think
Uh,
since maybe the first episode. So
oh wow,
it's
thank
uh
you.
it's
Where,
awesome to be a part of
yeah,
this.
where are you calling in from today?
I'm based in Long Island, New York, in a little
Nice,
town called Long Beach. So
sweet.
yeah, right in New York, right where I grew up, pretty much.
Wow. Well, I want to get into all of that, but I want to read your bio first. So to give people context for this whole conversation. So Martin Dara is a certified transformational coach. He's been working in the coaching industry for over 7 years. He began coaching basketball because he struggled with confidence on and off the court growing up. He works with students as a teacher and coaches them to recognize where confidence, resilience, and insecurity come from. His goal is to help students understand that they are not broken, they are not damaged goods, and they do not need fixing. He's bringing this understanding into schools and working with teams to help students understand their human nature, which in turn will help them in their classrooms, in their relationships, and into sports. So, again, I'm so grateful you're here because I have a taekwondo business and I work with a lot of young children. And so when I knew that you were working with students, I just knew I had to get you on the podcast so we could talk about students. So to kick us off, I'd love for you to tell us, what's your story? How did you get here? Where did you start? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, like you kind of said, like when I played basketball back in high school, it was a big deal. Like there was 90 kids that tried out, and there's 5 kids on the court at a time. So they took 12 kids, and going into high school, I was one of the kids to make it. So it was so cool to be a part of that team. But there was always this kind of fear or this worry going through my head while I'm on the court or in practice, and I was just so scared of making mistakes. So I'm constantly thinking about, like, what if I bounce the ball off my foot, or if I shoot and I miss, like, what's my coach gonna think, or what are the cheerleaders gonna say, um, and it really affected me because basketball was like my favorite sport, and I just wasn't fully there. And eventually, going into so I was on the team for 2 years, as a freshman and a sophomore, and then my junior year, that's the big varsity team, that's the big tryout, and I didn't make the team. I got cut, and that was like the biggest fear of all happening. And I started playing back at my like elementary school. There was like a league for kids that weren't on varsity teams, and I played with a couple of my friends, and all of a sudden everything changed. So that phrase that Michael Neal shares with us. He goes, everything was different, or no, nothing was different, but everything changed.
Yeah, or yeah, nothing, yeah, on the surface, nothing looked like it was different or nothing changed, but everything felt different and it looked different from inside
Ex-
out. Yeah.
exactly. So it wasn't like, oh, I just found this brand new coach, or I discovered this new move that I could dunk or whatever. I couldn't do that. So all of a sudden I just enjoyed playing, and I was just having fun, and my ability level went from like down here where when I tried out for this varsity team where I couldn't do anything, to all the way up here where I felt comfortable with the ball in my hands. I felt comfortable dribbling, shooting, and everything. And I think back to that a lot because after that point, basketball kind of became like a safe space for me. And
Mm.
so when I got to college, I didn't play like on a college team, but we had the gym. We would go. We'd have a pickup game. We did intramurals, which was just like for anybody to kind of sign up for and play. And anytime there was like a test, or I was worried or stressed out, like fight with my girlfriend at the time, I would go play basketball. and it just calmed me down and relaxed me. And it was such a different feeling on the court from where I was as a freshman and sophomore in high school. And once I graduated college, I kind of knew. I mean, even in college, I started watching the game more and learning from coaches and reading books, and I just knew that I wanted to become a basketball coach to make sure that kids didn't feel that way, that they weren't worried about making mistakes and they could just go out and play and be comfortable in their own skin on the court. So that was basically what I did right out of college. I was listening to some podcasts and found out that there was a coach not too far from me. I emailed him, was just like, hey, can I take you out to lunch? And like, can I ask you a few questions? And he was great. He was such an awesome guy. And he offered me a volunteer position. So I was working full time. So like, I didn't really need the money. So I was just like, yeah, like this is amazing. And it ended up being such an awesome experience to coach these guys. And I mean, he even said like I got super lucky because the guys at this high school were just like a perfect team. Like they were just so good. They worked together. They were so nice and they were fun to watch too. So I got to be a part of that team. It was Walt Whitman High School in Bethesda, Maryland, and I got to coach them for 2 years, and I just learned so much. And but that full time job was killing me,
Mm.
and I started to see the same pattern happening again, where it was a sales role in a mortgage company. So we were trying to sell people mortgages to help them buy a house. And I started seeing that same thing happening. Oh, I'm not as confident here. I don't really like it. I'm not enjoying it as much. Other people that start at the same time are moving up faster than me. And I could just see like kind of the basketball was helping me get through these work weeks, and this was kind of draining me.
Mm.
And it was, I noticed that same kind of feeling. And what I saw on the basketball court was all these guys are teachers. Everybody, is teaching, but obviously I don't have any of those degrees or certifications. So I was like, how can I become a teacher like right away? And I ended up reaching out to some of the people from my college, went to Thailand to teach because we had this program, luckily enough, and that's that led me to you. I started teaching in Thailand, and the big question that I kept asking was, I'm coaching basketball in Thailand now, and this is awesome, but how can I impact more people? Like, how can I have this, how can I help more than just the 12, 15 kids on the team? And I started getting into more coaching and working with kids. And, you know, I was just trying to learn how to become a better coach. So I did all these certifications and did all these programs, and it was just so valuable to learn that and to have that experience, because now uh, what I'm doing is just so important, I think, and working with these kids and just watching them feel more comfortable and do better. And it's not, at the end of that bio that you read, it's not just in sports. Like these kids are starting to improve their relationships or improve how they're doing in the classroom. And a lot of people are like, how could that even happen? Like, how could you working with this kid in basketball, how does he do better in the classroom? But it's just the fact that they're starting to understand they can be themselves, and I'm showing them different, ways to listen and different ways to, have these things. And I think the most important thing for them to know is that they already have all of this stuff inside. Like there's nothing wrong with them, but we decide to cover up a lot of these things and try to fit in or try to, change who we are, or cover it up like, oh, I can't be myself around, this group of girls, or I can't be myself because, the bully's going to make fun of me. So once they start feeling more and more comfortable, it changes everything. And that's really what I'm working with these students now to help them build. Uh, and it's been really impactful to be a part of that and to witness. And I just wish I had someone to come up to me, before that tryout for the varsity team, or even when I was on the team the first 2 years, and just say to me like, you have these tools already, and you're covering them up for no reason. You are just scared of making mistakes, but like you're amazing how you are already. So just go out there and have some fun. And that would have changed my high school experience, because it was happening off the basketball court too. It happened at the baseball tryouts. It happened, when I was just talking to girls or talking to friends, and I was, worried so much about what other people were going to think or say about me that I wasn't being myself.
Like, wow, that's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know any of those things about you until now. And a lot makes sense now. and and what I love about your story, because I think everybody can relate to that. Like I can relate to that, being really, really self-conscious in high school, and trying out sports and talking to girls, and trying really hard to cover that up and trying to be confident, or just spending so much time trying to handle myself instead of really enjoying being in high school and being a kid. And just you telling that story, I think a lot of people listening will have like a sigh of relief to know that there's someone like you out there, being the coach, the person that they needed when they were a kid to say those things. And I know that you also started a program working with high school kids specifically um, on teaching them how their minds work. And I'd love for you to share more about that and what you've learned from that and what you've seen from that program with the students.
Um, so, I mean, first of all, it's been amazing. And, I appreciate you saying that too. Uh, so this program, it's been it's been in the works for a couple of years, and it's really starting to come to life right now. And, basically what it's based on is that we get to have our own experience of life. And what I mean by that, and I could give an example in a second, is that when something happens, we have our own thought process around it. And our thinking is the key. As Sydney Banks said, that was the missing link. And once you start to notice that and notice these little things happening around you, it's like, okay, I have like much more control over this. And I don't have to get so frustrated. I don't have to act this way. So the example that I always share is, if there's three of us on an airplane, let's say me, you, and some other person, and you know, I've flown a decent amount. So, when the turbulence happens on the airplane, it doesn't really affect me anymore. So then, I don't know how much you've flown. I'm sure you've flown plenty, but for the sake of the story, like we're going to just say when the turbulence happens, you get a little scared. And then there's the third guy that's next to us, and he's just passed out. He's just sleeping. And so we each have our own experience on that plane. So is it the turbulence that causes the experience, or do we each have our own kind of experience, our own story about the turbulence? And so once I've kind of learned that or heard that, so much, like I just had a whole new perspective of what is going on around us. And I think there was a great story that a teacher, she was coming to my class, she read from this book, and it's perfect to share right now, especially because you're in Thailand. And so the story was that it was, I think, like in the 1950s, so it's about like 70 years ago. There was uh, a Buddha statue, clay Buddha statue, and it started to crack. And the monks, or who was there at the time, were kind of freaking out because this big statue was breaking right in front of their eyes, and they see that the cracks are happening, and eventually the crack gets so big that you could see inside the crack. And when one of the monks looked into the crack, they noticed that underneath the clay was a gold statue of Buddha. And so in the 1700s, or when, I don't know the exact dates, that's not really as important, but a long time ago, Thailand was constantly being invaded, and they decided to cover the gold statue with clay to help prevent these invaders from stealing it, from stealing the gold. And they finally uncovered it, and that's the golden Buddha statue in Bangkok, Thailand now. So it's a big sightseeing thing. But I loved that story so much because what I share with these kids is like, you have that gold inside of you. We all do. Doesn't matter, if you were born in Thailand, if you were born in New York, if you're born, anywhere in the world, we have that gold. But what's happening is that we're growing up, we're learning, we're seeing what's happening around us. How do I fit in? How do I, what are these people going to think about me? And we start to put that clay around our gold. And so I try to share with these kids that, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. And it's so valuable, I think, for them to hear that, because I don't think anyone's ever said that. And most people probably have never been like, you are broken, but they start to come up with a story or come up with reasons why they are. And we start to put this whole story together about who we are, what's wrong with me. Oh, I'm depressed. I'm this, I'm angry, I'm furious. And we start to come up with the whole story about how we act. And once we kind of start to peel that back, it's like, wow, we actually have that gold under there. And it's really nice to hear from somebody who was totally covered in clay for a while, for a long time. And it's still easy for us to put the clay up, and it still happens to everybody. But if you're aware of the gold underneath, it just changes so much. And what's been really powerful for me is to remind myself that these students have the gold in them too, because there's been times, there were some challenging days at these schools that I've been working at, where, these kids, they have to come to my class because I'm a teacher. They don't want to be there. They're bored. They're tired. They got other stuff on their mind, and they're driving me crazy sometimes. But if I could kind of slow down and remind myself, like, okay, they're just frustrated. Like, they still have that gold, and they can't touch my gold. So I got to keep that strong, because the more I'm sharing from that gold, the more that they're going to see it for themselves.
Well, damn, mic drop. I'm really happy we captured all that gold on this podcast. I just want to repeat the last parts you said. I don't even think you know what you said. Right? You said the more I share from my gold, the more they can tap into their own gold. And just a few things occurred to me to share when you were talking. There's a world of difference in creating a life or living a life from a place of you're broken to living a life where you're okay. And I reckon if you come from that broken place, or if you think you're broken and you're trying to live and create things and create a job or a relationship, it's hard, because it like what occurs to me is because I used to think something was wrong with me, and like something must be wrong with me, given that something like I don't have this, or I'm not successful, so something must be wrong with me, or I can't create this, I can't win at sports all the time, so I must not be good enough. And there was a lot of time spent being really self-conscious versus really enjoying the sport I was playing, really enjoying life. And as you played basketball, I played taekwondo. And I think some of my most memorable taekwondo matches is when I didn't care and I really enjoyed playing for the sake of playing. And I played the best I've ever played. And I was like, wow, I wish I knew this when I was 12 versus 33 when I'm retiring from the sport, you know? And I'm so grateful that you're there as a light to share with these kids. I wonder if you have any stories from students in your classrooms and the things they've seen, like the impacts of hearing this.
It, yeah, I definitely do. So I've been this last school year, I was working with, uh, I was teaching at a school goes from like pre-K to eighth grade.
Mm.
So I've been teaching phys ed, which is like the gym class, and I teach that to every grade, and then I teach health to sixth, seventh, and eighth. And so in our health classes, that was really the main idea was, they when I got there, they were kind of like, here's a binder, you could use it, but like the curriculum's yours, like make it up pretty much. And I was so excited about that because I was like, I don't want to read, I tried the binder for a couple of weeks just to kind of figure it out and see if there was anything worthwhile. And there was some good stuff in there, but ultimately I was able to make the curriculum and I just went with mental health because the school that I'm at, it's, Long Beach is a good neighborhood. It's a nice little town. It's a beach town. It's not like we're in the inner city. And even growing up, like, my parents were, they were amazing. Like like I had a great like upbringing and my three sisters, like we had a good life. Um, so even if you have those things, you still may that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be confident when you're out in the world. So I recognize that at this school that there was a big issue with mental health that there's a lot going on in this town, especially since COVID happened and these kids were young when that occurred, and they just had to stop going to fifth grade or fourth grade, or you know some of them missed kindergarten, and those are like valuable years that you're supposed to be developing friendships and learning important things in school. So I turn that curriculum, instead of talking about like our body and nutrition and hygiene and that kind of stuff, I just went like, we're just going right for the mental health. We're gonna just do that the whole year. And uh and it went really well, honestly. I mean, like I said, some of the times the kids were going crazy and there were sometimes I couldn't really control them, but there was one class that I specifically remember. These two kids were probably like the talkative, like loudest. They kind of riled everybody up. Those two kids in the class, like, I don't want to say that they were the troublemakers, but like they would just like get the kids going. So if they would just talk all the time and joke and call out and interrupt people, and I shared that story that I shared in the beginning about the basketball team. And I don't really know even why, like, that was the conversation for that day. Like, I just like, we were reading a book. We were reading Mavis Karn's book. It's That Simple. So, uh, yeah, there it is.
This episode sponsored by It's That Simple, a user's manual for human beings by Mavis Karn, with a forward with Michael Neal. Thank you.
So we were reading that book, and and I just decided, I was like, all right, we're just gonna like put this down. Like, you guys are totally checked out. You're like, talking over everybody. You guys are like, it's just not happening today. So we put the book down and I just started sharing. And I told that story about me being afraid on the basketball court, and, you know, and all of a sudden you could just hear like a pin drop in that classroom, and they all just stopped. And the two kids, I specifically remember like making a point to ask them, like, what are you, what's going on right now? Like, you usually have like, something to say back to me, or you usually have something like that's on your mind. And I just said, like, how are you like feeling right now? And one of them said calm, and the other one said relaxed. And for the first time the whole school year, that class was like at peace. And I was just like, all right, we're done here. And that was it. And it was like amazing to kind of just see that happen, and for them to experience that moment of peace, because it was so clear that it wasn't happening in that room or in any classroom for that class.
Mhm. I feel you. And I love how you shared that story because it relates to what you were saying earlier. And it felt like in that moment, the kids were experiencing their own gold from your story. And isn't it funny how it's a metaphorical gold, or like your infinite creative potential, it there's so much to it that we don't know, and its effects of helping people calm down, have more clarity. Um, it's just amazing.
It really is. And I don't know, what, there was that feeling that I had that was like, I could force them to keep
Mm,
reading this book and they're not going to get anything out of it.
right.
Or we could put the book down and we could just like, I could just see what happens. And for some reason, that story, it wasn't like I was being interviewed or like, hey, how'd you become a coach? And that was like,
Right,
I
right,
told that
right.
story. Like it just happened. And it was amazing. And the year before that, I was at a different school. I was at this school called St. Kevin's,
Mm,
and I was teaching English there. So that year I was teaching English to fifth through eighth, but fifth was like my homework. So I spent by far the most time with them. And what we would do is we would, I had a whole bookshelf of all these different books from people from all over the place. And I would grab like 3 or 4 books off the shelf just randomly. And we would play like, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and like 30. And we go up and down the classroom. And sometimes it would take like all day because people aren't paying attention. They're guessing the same number like 5 times. And whoever got it would get to pick the book. So you pick from like 4 books, and then they would get to pick the page number, and then I would read it, and then we had to discuss it. And so the amount of times that that page number was exactly what we discussed, or exactly like what they needed to hear, was unbelievable. And the kids would ask me like, how did you plan that? We talked about that same thing yesterday. I was like, I didn't know what book this kid was going to pick. I didn't know he was going to pick page 30. Like, I had no idea. And they were like amazed that this happened. And it was just so cool. It was like I had no control over that. Like, I just let them pick. And it just was so relevant to our conversations, to what was going on. They were like, they thought I was like a magician.
totally stealing that idea, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, please
Yeah,
do.
isn't that cool? That what occurs to me is like you did such a good job with their listening, that and intuitiveness, that the right thing showed up at the right time. And how cool is that for them to experience wisdom in the moment? And I can't help but wonder how helpful this will be as they go through life and they experience the ups and downs, the peaks and the valleys. So I want to ask you this. Given your experience in working with kids in high schools and coming into this inside understanding, what does confidence, resilience, and insecurity look like to you now? Like, what do you see fresh about that?
I see a lot of stuff, uh, but I think the biggest thing, what I used to believe, was that confidence comes from outside things. Confidence comes from driving a Porsche, or it comes from being on the basketball team. It comes from making the big shot at the end of the game to, win, or, your team winning the Super Bowl, or, that's where I thought confidence came from. And when I told that story about the basketball teams, it's like I didn't make the varsity team. And I thought at the time, like those couple of days right after, I was fully under this impression, how can I be confident since I didn't make the team? And then I went and played in this other league, and all of a sudden I had all the confidence in the world. And so I didn't realize it at the time. I honestly realized it like within the last few years since I learned this understanding that, oh, confidence didn't come from being on the team or having the most sales or anything like that. It just came from me. And it came from me being comfortable enough to be myself, to be on the court and be, where I'm at, and understanding there are kids that are going to be better than me. But if I feel good about myself, then we might win, we might lose, I might make a play, they might steal it from me. It does, like, but I'm here and I'm having fun and I'm feeling good about it. And I think once I figured out that just like it's amazing what it does. So it's not about owning the most stuff, or making the most money, because we see some of these famous actors and actresses that have, or celebrities that have everything in the world, and they're depressed, or they're just like not there. And you hear stories about people that just got diagnosed with like terminal cancer, and all of a sudden they like are the happiest people in the world. So it's like you don't need to wait until you get that diagnosis. Like you have that ability already, like you can create anything that you want.
I really hear you, and I resonate with that. It's so funny how once you say it out loud, when you realize you have a middleman between you and what you really want, which is the feeling, the happiness, the confidence. And it's so helpful to realize that you don't need a middleman. And some people learn these lessons way later in life when they get the thing they thought that would make them happy and it didn't. But to learn that when you're in high school and you can start really creating the life that just lights
Hmm.
you up, like that's incredible. And I don't think anybody's immune to the peaks and valleys of life. Like you got to go through it. But being able to go through it with a deeper understanding of how their mind works, I can see could be incredibly helpful to everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even with where insecurity comes from, when you, what I'm sharing with these kids and having these conversations, it's like, oh, insecurity isn't coming from me getting rejected. Like it's just a story that I'm telling myself, because there's been plenty of times where I wanted to go ask out a girl, and I came up with this whole story about all these reasons why I shouldn't, or what she's going to say. And before I could even get to her, I was already rejected. And it was just because of this story that I totally came up with by myself. And it just wasn't helpful. So I think that we come up with, we are so creative that we can make up a story about anything and we don't even notice it. Like it's not like, oh, you could just go write a book. No, I'm talking about like the stories that we tell about ourselves. And you actually, I think, I don't know when you said this, but this was such a impactful phrase for me. Was you said that we sometimes we have like stale thinking. And what occurred to me when you said stale was like, I think of like food that's gone bad, that's
Yeah,
stale.
yeah, yeah.
And like, you have to clean out your pantry,
Mm.
or you got to clean out the cabinets or the cupboard or whatever you call it. And if you don't do that, like it's gonna fill up and it's gonna be gross.
I could see you telling the kids, and kids would get that, like, ew, like gross food. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what's in your minds if you don't clean it out.
yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Because we latch on to these stories about
Right,
ourselves. And
right,
like,
right.
how many people like heard at some point like I'm shy.
Mm,
And now it's been 15 years and they still think that.
mm,
And like they heard, I heard this one a long time ago. It was like you're not a good writer, or like your writing sucks. And I believed it for a long time. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I'm done with that. And I started a blog and people like enjoyed it. And it was like, I could have stayed with that story. And who knows, maybe it is true. Maybe I'm not a good writer. But at some point, I just decided that, like, I'm going to let that story go and something's coming out of me. And I just want to share it and see if people enjoy it.
What occurs to me is, as you were sharing that, how much energy goes into keeping up a story, how much habits are formed, or how many habits are formed around keeping alive that story, and that, keeping up the stale thought in your head. And the moment you clean out your cupboard, using your metaphor, like there's so much more room for fresh thinking, for fresh foods that are good for you, that are healthy, that just show up. And you're like, oh wow, like I wish I knew this sooner. And that you can really rely on it. You can rely on that fresh thinking to come through and light your day up, or in whatever direction you're looking at, and like how helpful it is
It,
to know that. Yeah.
it really is. And I've witnessed it right in front of my eyes where, kids, have heard the story, from someone in their life. Like it could be a parent or a sibling or a friend, or, the principal at the school, or, your teacher was like, oh, he's a fighter. And like, so this kid thinks like, okay, now if I get in any sort of altercation or situation or somebody annoys me, now I got to go hit them. Or, it happens so often where it's like, this is a story, like I have to be this way. Like he's the class clown. Now I'm attached to making the kids laugh. And if I do something that doesn't get the laugh, now what am I? And now the story builds.
Right, right. I see that so much, and how helpful that is again. So we're coming up on time. So I want to ask you the last question I asked everybody on this
Okay.
podcast is, if you could give the people listening or the world a gift that would make a difference or make an impact, what gift would that be?
Wow, I should have known that this was coming.
There's no right
And
answer, and there's no wrong answers either.
it's interesting because what I want to say is something that I can't give because it's something that they already have. But I
Yeah.
want to give more people access to that gold.
Mm,
And I think, by what we're doing, by you being here, living your life and enthusiastically, that gold is just coming out.
mm,
And if I could just give that, I just want my students to know that, and their parents to know it and their siblings. And something I wrote, they asked at the school, at the beginning of the year, like, what's your wish for the year? And I just said that I wanted to change people's perspectives, the students' perspectives, but not just the students, like the whole community around them.
Mm.
And I think by giving that, if they could see that gold a little bit more often, that would be an awesome gift.
You're on fire today, bro. Mic drops all over the place. Well,
AirPod
it's
drop.
AirPod drop. Yeah. Gosh, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you and talk with you. And I've seen you since the beginning, not the basketball, but in the coaching. And I want to tell you just how proud I am of you and watching you grow and the impact you're having. It just lights my heart up. And it's such a good feeling to know that there's someone like you in the world doing what they're doing and being a light for other people. So yeah, thank you on behalf of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, you really I didn't really highlight how
Yeah.
important you were
Oh,
in this journey,
okay.
but the story about how we met is just
Yeah.
amazing. And like that was another one of those days where, I almost didn't go to that uh what it was like a
But
mind, body,
yeah,
soul
yeah,
kind of.
for context, it was a mind, body, soul fair in Bangkok. And I almost didn't go. And then you
Yeah.
almost didn't go. And then we
And
bumped into
yeah,
each other and we connected and it was like
and
one conversation. Yeah.
it was. And then literally the next week, I had to fly home because of COVID,
Right.
and I left
Right.
Thailand and I haven't been back. So it was like, if I skipped that event or,
Right.
whatever, like it was all like that all happened somehow. And ever since then, we've connected. And like I said,
Yeah.
I've been listening to you and learning
Thank
from
you.
you. And I'm just so grateful for everything you're up to and all the people you're impacting. So
Oh, thank
uh,
you for that.
please keep it up, and thank you for being a mentor, a big
Oh,
brother that I never had. I appreciate it.
I got your back. All right. Well, I'm going to stop recording. And again, such a pleasure. And we'll speak soon. All right. Bye bye.